Okay, so we are live. Welcome everybody. For those of you watching live, and for those of you watching the replay, thank you very much for attending. I'm joined today by Petra. I'm going to say Jiraskova. How am
Jiraskova. Close
I?
enough.
Okay,
Close
okay,
enough.
good. So, Petra, I always say I don't really introduce you. I think it's best that you introduce yourself because I'm going to butcher it. I'm not going to hit all the high points as well as you could. So, can you just, for the audience, just give some background, some context of who you are and what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So again, thank you for having me, Colin. I'm Petra. I am the founder of Olive Drink Services, and I really do two parts. I help individuals and teams navigate conflict. It reduces a couple. It does a couple of things. It reduces burnout. It reduces turnover rate. And here's the thing: conflict is inevitable. A lot of times when we bring up conflict, people think of wars, arguments. Conflict often happens in silent ways as well, avoiding conversations, and it eats at us, right? And it can damage the relationships and also the teams. So the idea is, hey, there are these tools and practical tools to navigate it so it doesn't have to get to that point.
Amazing. So, in preparation for this conversation, I was actually thinking about the work that you
Mhm.
do.
Yes.
And it occurred to me that actually it's one of those invisible things, like you've just said. So I've worked in many companies, I've worked in big corporations, in small companies, and in between. And oftentimes it's the thing that's not actually highlighted. So I was just like, how do people know to come to you? So it's it's almost that thing that we don't talk about. So, like you
Mhm.
said, it can be quiet. It's a thing that we're not saying. It's a resentment or something that boils
Mhm.
under. Because I think on when I initially thought of the topic, I thought of conflict as arguments of shouting,
Mhm.
and you think, oh, okay, that's very visible. But the
Yeah.
other side to that, which I don't know, I'd be interested to know, in your experience, the quiet stuff is probably the bigger impact. I don't know if that's the way that I think, but
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. A lot of times people think conflict is like when people go at it, right? They're arguing, they're shouting. Um, at least they're communicating to a point. Not healthy, but they're communicating. This is where we get where a lot of people, and I find more people than not, fall into avoidance. They try to avoid the conversation to preserve peace, but then that frustration is building inside them. And it often does two things. When you're avoiding, you're pushing the other person away, or you do end up exploding and you may say some things that you didn't even mean. Um, in workplace, maybe you even quit. It pushes you to the edge. So it festers and it really grows inside of you. And some of the things, the warning signs to look for is if you're if you have a conversation with somebody and you're sitting on it with somebody you care about, sometimes you can avoid some people when you are not invested in them, but if you're invested in the person and then you go home and you could be washing the dishes and you're thinking, oh, I wish I said this and I should have said that, and you keep replaying it in your head, or you see the person and you notice something feels off, you feel like there's distance, your body language tends to tense up a little bit. Maybe you notice that you're avoiding eye contact, you are not laughing at the jokes that they would normally make, you're not really talking to them, then maybe you start gossiping. Those are all signs that something is happening.
yeah, that sort of resonates. So I think I'm going to take it in a bit of direction for myself because if I
Mhm.
can just put myself in the scenario. So um, I always I always believe that a lot of things that happen later on in life stem from sort of our childhood years. We're quite impressionable. And I always look to my childhood. And when I say that, I think oftentimes that sparks ideas of abuse, etc. And that wasn't, I had a very nice, very secure childhood, but it was kind of, if I say lacking in emotions, it was just, very steady, very calm. And occasionally my dad would shout at us, and it was, I think I think he was trying to protect us in many ways. He was, struggling at work, not struggling, but he'd had a hard time at work, and he didn't want to bring that home to the family. And so what he did is he kind of sat on those emotions, and then all of a sudden something very small and insignificant would absolutely blow up. And I think what that actually caused in myself was this, I want to say scaredness, and I'm not even sure if that's a right word, but it's basically, I would enter a room, and I would need to know automatically if there was a problem, and if there was a problem, was it anything that I was doing? So I've spent most of my career that way, and that's a very tiring way to be. It was always like constantly assessing. But we can dig into that if you want to go into it. That's fine. But when what I realized is that I'm a big conflict avoider, and I will do absolutely anything to avoid a conflict, because I think my reference point is that my dad, shouted and was angry, and there was, again, there's no physical abuse in that, but that doesn't always need to be the case. We sometimes think that, these massive scenes, but as a child, it was quite like unnerving, and my brain basically shrinks, and I go into that fight or flight. So anytime I've been in an office, I want to say an office, and I don't know why it just turns out to be an office. Maybe it's because you spend most of your time at work. And then I think about when there's been arguments or raised voices, there is a trigger in me that's like, oof. And even, I mean, I've been in situations, where there's people having a disagreement about something, and I take that energy, and even if it's nothing to do with me, and I'm like, oof, and it really shakes me. It's really something. So it's a strange thing, but because of that, I am an active avoider of conflict. And I realized, looking back, that has almost a bigger effect, because I'm not saying anything, or I'm avoiding it, because my association is, if I say something, it's conflict, I'm going to freeze up, my brain's going to go numb, they're going to shout at me, everyone's going to look at me, so I avoid it. And so you've created this thing which doesn't always happen, but in order to avoid that, you go and do something else. And I feel, again, that is such a big thing that's run throughout my life. And I'm like, well, actually, could I have had another conversation? Could I have approached it differently? And I see it a lot in work. I see it when I speak to people. There are a lot of people, I think that's where gossiping starts. People are trying to vent their frustrations rather than actually have the conversation. So
with the person directly, right?
Exactly. So that's, it's almost, it just sort of spreads in, rather than, so I'm thinking now of how many times gossip actually starts in a company. And sometimes when you take some distance back, you go, well, why don't you just go and speak to that person? But they don't. They go and start to talk to other people, and it becomes like a gang, and it's, oh yeah, I'm right, they're wrong, etc. And so the dynamics of that is huge. And the amount of energy and effort in that company is so diverted because of this conflict avoidance. It's huge, right? That's how I'm seeing it.
So you've mentioned a few things, and I wrote them down, and let's kind of hit over everything that you mentioned, right? So I want to say a lot of people are avoiders, and it's pretty common. It's more common than not, and then also accommodators. And you're right, it goes into our childhood, right? This is, I mean, our parents, for a lot of us, these are the superheroes. You don't think anybody can hurt your parent when we're little. Like, our parents are everything. And this is where we start to learn how to navigate conflict. And when it's avoided or fear induced, I remember I would ask my mom, is aunt visiting today? Because I knew that if I gave her bad news about my grade, I wouldn't be screamed at, right? That's that fear induced, that it just goes a long way. And so then we get into the adulthood. And some of it we carry with us, but then we also have to evaluate if the way we are handling conflict is still serving us to today. Yeah. If it still takes us to that paralysis of being a child, if it still leaves us unsatisfied, unfulfilled, unhappy, where we feel like we need to maybe go to somebody else, that's not good, right? So we might want to reach out to somebody. We may want to explore other tools to say, like, hey, how can we address this? But then that leads us to a few other things that, it would be, if the answer to say, like, hey, go talk to somebody, if it was that simple, it would be brilliant. A lot of the times we have to understand who we're dealing with, right? So I know for fact, I tend to always address things no matter what. But there are times, even with my own bosses, where I chose not to address it because I knew that they were not going to be receptive. It was going to be seen as, oh, I'm not doing a good job, you think I'm a horrible boss type of deal. It has turned on me where, a lot of times it goes both ways. We both have to work on our communication. We both have to be able to receive and give feedback and have constructive conversation. And so if you are direct and you say, okay, let me go talk to your boss, but your boss is avoidant and then gets defensive, that will deter you from going to them ever again, right? So it's kind of, and this is where it could go into another topic, but what I find is that a lot of people are put into leadership roles where they are not trained to handle some of these situations. Right? So they're in it because they did a good job, and now they're kind of sink or swim type of deal, which is, a lot more leadership needs a support. And like we said, when we avoid, a few things happen. We can destroy the relationship. We can destroy ourselves internally. Because when we feel like we can't talk about something and it eats at us, it creates stress, it creates burnout, it can mess with your sleep. It has a lot of consequences on you.
Yeah, I think the first thing for me, so I've tried to be more self-aware, and I think for me, I always say self-awareness is like a superpower, because I think if you can see what's going on for you, what's the triggers, what's the what are you reacting to, how are you feeling, what's your energy, etc. I think that opens a door to understanding about yourself, and then you can either say, okay, that's something I'm okay with, or I like, or that's something maybe I can work on. So again, none of the things about my childhood really sort of came, it just didn't just pop in there. I actually went through therapy, which I am the biggest advocate of therapy. I think there is this negative connotation about therapy, that you can't handle the world, etc. But I went through it when I made a big change. I moved to Luxembourg and turned my world upside down. Job wasn't going as well as I thought, etc., etc. And it led me on this self-discovery path. and I wouldn't say I'm enlightened in any way, but it allowed me to look at myself and take some distance and see, okay, these things are probably triggers and why they were, not as in a victim way, but just in an understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So having this awareness, I think, is super important. And what I found is that the work that I did on myself, then you could see these patterns emerging in other people.
Yes.
And I think that's very helpful. So I think when you say about these conversations with bosses, etc., I'm also thinking from a point of view, if I was a founder of a company, etc., just to even see, okay, how are my team communicating or not communicating? What's
Mm-hmm.
the subtle signs? And like you said, it's quite there's quite some nuances in there, things that you might just miss because you're not paying attention. It's just you're busy running other companies,
Yeah.
etc. But it also plays into this this thing that I've realized about, that we're all different personality types. We're all,
Mm-hmm.
you know, now we're not all supposed to get along. We're all parts of a jigsaw
Yes.
puzzle oftentimes, and we're not supposed to fit together. There's supposed to be someone in between that helps connect those pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Yet in companies, we're thrown together. So I think most jobs that I've ever been to, I've been thrown into a team, and
Right.
you've basically got to get along with these people. And most people
Mm-hmm.
are nice, but some people are the exact opposite of me, and that can
Yeah.
feel, again, that can trigger me in certain ways. And like you say, the going to someone who knows going to be, so I need to be handled with kid gloves. I just want to have a nice conversation, and I'm okay for people to explain stuff to me, but the
Mm-hmm.
shouting, and when that happens, I'm a bit like, oh. So again, thinking about your job, I think, like, you're the mediator between the two. So again, I think about things like marriage counselors, and
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes you've got two people here probably saying the same thing,
Yes.
um, but just in different words. And
Mm-hmm.
having a marriage counselor to just sit on the outside and just go, okay, no, what actually Colin is saying is X, Y, Z. It may come across this way, but he's thinking this. And then it
Mm-hmm.
gets translated, and you go, oh, okay.
Yes.
And we don't have that in companies, do we? Like you said,
No.
leaders are not designed to have that skill set, right?
And I want to say something too, really quickly, to the part where you said we're mixed in, right? We're thrown into a team. And what's really important for companies to have team building exercises, to do workshops, because most people, even though we're different, we have some type of commonalities. Oh, I've seen this in workshops all the times. Some people were thrown in and they're like, oh, this person doesn't like me and this person doesn't like me. They somehow, without me even noticing, they're paired up. And then in those 5 minutes, they figure out how much stuff they have in common. And then they can leave at the end of the training. They might not be friends, but they're cordial with each other. And they can say hello to each other again. And that extra tension goes away, right? So a lot of times we're human beings. Yet we're different, and a lot of our experiences may be similar and overlap. I cannot tell you how many times I've bonded with people just over dogs, okay? I can bond with over anything, but I see that as a glue. I'm like, okay, now we have something in common. Now we have something uniting that is bringing us together, and let's work from that, right? Now we're seeing each other as humans, and we're humanizing each other. Um, and as far as I know you mentioned to say, like, when do you determine when to have a conversation, right? Especially for an avoidant person. And I
Mm.
was actually having a conversation yesterday with somebody, and they said, I'm avoiding it. I don't know if I want to have it. And so sometimes a few people, what helps me too is, all right, so let's write down the positives and negatives. If I don't have this conversation, what is going to happen most likely? The friendship may be lost. I get more frustrated. I get more burnt out, all of this stuff. What could be the positive outcomes, right? Oh, we build stronger relationship. And even, and the way I look at it sometimes, and that's for me, when I look at the list, I'm like, I am going to lose this relationship no matter what if I keep avoiding this conversation. Yeah. So the outcome could be the same for either or, but at least if I have this conversation, I may be able to salvage our relationship and transform it and make it stronger because we're able to have difficult conversations. And that does not mean that I'm comfortable having them. I just know that they're needed, it's yeah.
It's do you know what? So when you were talking, whenever I've thought about conflict, or thought, oh, I should go and speak to this person, I've never once written it down as a list. So I'm actually a big advocate of writing, I want to say, to-do lists. I've started journaling. I sort of pick it up and then drop it, etc. When it's ever come to conflict, I've never written it down. I don't know if that's because my mind's shrinking and it's scared or etc. But so while I was thinking about that, is that our minds make something sometimes very small into very big very quickly, and then that can have an impact on how you feel and you're showing up. But actually, I'm thinking, why didn't I just write it down? What's like what's the worst case scenario, etc. And I think because of how our minds work, and again, maybe stuff in our childhood, we assume, okay, if I'm going to talk to my boss, he's going to be like my dad and he's going to shout at me. Really? You don't know that. So there's a lot of assumptions and stuff go on. So if you wrote those things down, you could actually, it's strange because I'm thinking about this conversation in my head, how it would go and this argument and stuff. And you go, just put it down on paper, because oftentimes, like you say, pros and cons really are not the same. But we add something quite small and make it really important, and something that's really big where you say, oh well, that doesn't matter, but okay. What a great technique.
I know. And two, something that has been really something that I've been talking to quite a few people is being intentional when you have the conversation. Believe it or not, as I call it, setting the stage really matters. The time of the day you're having a conversation, you have to understand, is it early in the morning? People might not be caffeinated enough, is it right before lunch? People might be very hangry, so that might not be the best time. So really a little bit after lunch, when it gets to settle, still enough energy, not too late in the evening, place that has lighting, because it does bring up your energy. Quiet place, and place that you can escape. People don't want to feel secluded, right? They don't want to be trapped. And usually neutral territory, not your house, not your house. And when it's in the office, I know sometimes power dynamic plays a role in it, but to re-empower your team member, there's conference rooms. Go into a conference room. So that way the guard comes down and they feel they're able to speak, they're going to be heard rather than reprimanded.
I had this vision of so I had a few bosses, and I don't know if it's been a while since I've worked in big companies, but and I know open plan becomes more of a common thing, but most of the bosses I had, they had a private office, and it might be a bit frosted over, but then you'd go in and you'd have to close the door, and even if it was myself or you saw other people, and they'd be in there for maybe like an hour or something like that. It feels, because it, I again, maybe this is something I should dig into a bit more for myself. But if you go into the boss's room, you don't want to storm out and like you say, this power dynamic. You've gone in there to talk about something, but it's their place, it's their location, where they are,
their territory.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
and it does it is anxiety induced
Yeah.
environment for somebody who is not in their position. So really, having meetings in a conference room, it's not that hard. Hey, let's meet over here because that will bring the guard down for them. And the idea is, and I think we're moving more towards the better way, in my opinion, is where leadership is changing. We want to focus on more empathy. We want to make sure that people are listening, that you are supporting people, that you are giving credit to your team members, and and that you're not blaming your team members, that you take the accountability for being their leader. And I do see that that is changing, and hopefully that will continue to change.
Yeah. So I've had this thought about, so
Mhm.
we often confuse managers and leaders, and
Mhm.
one and the other can be interchangeable. And I've talked to a number of people that sort of in the HR department, and they run sort of leadership programs,
Mhm.
and they put a huge budget on leadership training. Um,
Mhm.
but then, so one of the things that I've considered, or I've seen in my work career, is that someone was really good at their job. It doesn't necessarily matter what it was, and they were recognised for that. And then, as a recognition, the company basically promoted them into a managerial or leadership position. Now, what actually ends up happening is the guy or lady doing that job before was really good because they were connected to the thing that they really enjoyed doing, and they became
Mhm.
a master of it. And then they're actually taken away from doing the job, and they become a manager or a leader of people. The
Yeah.
skill sets are completely different, and I feel that we promote people um, too, I want to say too quickly, and I don't even mean that. I think we use promotions in the wrong way. We think people want recognition, but we promote them into positions that they're not suitable for. And
Mhm.
I've done it myself. I've taken positions where I didn't enjoy it. It wasn't what I was doing, but there was money behind it and status. And you think, okay,
Yeah.
and then that becomes a very very difficult thing to step away from. There's
Mhm.
there's a lot of ego attached to status and money. It's
Yes.
and you don't. It's only a few times I can think in my career where people have kind of stepped down from a position,
Mhm.
and there feels that there's shame related to that. So almost like you couldn't handle the job. But I think if we reframed that, we looked differently at leadership,
Mhm.
and we put people in the. I, I don't think I found too many people that are great leaders, because, like you said, the empathy part often isn't the thing that got them into that position.
Yeah.
Um, so then you're almost asking them to be the exact opposite of who they were. Now that,
Mhm.
and so it's not a blaming thing. It's just, now you're in a position where you have to dig in and find some skill set that isn't natural for you. You're spending all your day in
Mhm.
training. You're dealing with humans who are very complex.
Yeah.
And how does that all fit together, and how are you supposed to manage all of that? Yeah,
So I couldn't agree with you more. A lot of people are thrown that just because they're doing a great job, they're thrown into these leadership roles. And honestly, there needs to be more support. One, supporting them getting there, and continuing to provide guidance, and making sure that you are doing weekly check-ins with them just to see how they can feel more supported and how their teams are doing. But also, the person who is supporting the new leader needs to also know how to lead. This
yeah,
is where sometimes, somebody may think they're a great leader and they're really not.
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know if that ever happened to you, but I've
yeah,
I've seen it happen where somebody believes that they're amazing at their job, but the leadership under them did not feel supported at all.
yeah. I'm reminded of a job that I was in a company, and then they brought in a guy, and we were going through a transformation, and excuse me, they hired this guy, and he was very strange. One day you would walk into his office and he would praise you, and almost 10 minutes later he would, scold you for doing something wrong, and it was really quite. I wouldn't say toxic. For me, I found it very painful to be around him, and I definitely avoided it. And I don't. Again, thinking of your scenario, is that guy ever? If I had an open and honest conversation, can I truly say that he would listen to me? Because again, there's a power dynamic in it. He was obviously quite a few levels above me, but he didn't do that just with me. He did that with everybody, and it created this disruption within the teams, and everyone was like, and I understand, there's ways of motivating people, but it's like we sort of say the stick and the carrot. It's just like, but you didn't know which one you were going to get, and it was just like, and I often look back and I wonder, what, now I'm not working there, I think to myself, what has led him to be that way? I'm more curious because it doesn't affect me directly, but is he really unhappy with this thing? Like, is he in a position he's not happy with? What's going on?
Yeah.
So, but the ripple effects on that is massive because everyone was coming in really unsure. And the thing is, from the outside perspective, that can look like that, oh yeah, now I've got everyone under control. People are scared of me. But that's the short-term thing. You want people to feel open to create, to come to you with ideas and to explore and be supported and to enjoy their work. And that, for me, that's the ideal leader, that can adjust and see you as an individual, and can, sort of change up and down to accommodate you, but sees people as a whole, not just, this is my way, we're all going to do it that way, if that makes sense.
So I think you hit on a few things. Anytime there is atypical behavior, there's something else going on underneath the surface. It could have been, and I don't know this person, right? So here is me making a ton of assumptions, but it could have been something related to personal, like something at home. Because here's the thing, when people say conflict does not end and start where you are, like the place of location. So if something is and I don't know if it was for you, but when something like that happens at work, you carry it home.
Yeah.
When something happens at home, you carry it to work. There have been studies done that over 70% of people cannot separate the two. It impacts them. It goes hand in hand. And so when you are afraid to go to your boss, it sets a very toxic culture. It does not, the innovation goes down. I'm sure there was a lot of turnover rate probably at your place, or like at the department. And we talked about conflict as I was like 22 when this happened, but I had a boss. And I was pretty new to the company. I had to learn. I didn't have all the information, and I had to learn on the go as I was dealing with clients. And anytime I went to speak to my supervisor, the doors were closed, and I would get the hand.
Oh, jeez.
Or and these are all such disrespectful signs. And so I didn't feel comfortable going to him ever again. I started going to other people that didn't mind helping me. But here's the thing. Eventually people noticed that that's what was happening, and I don't believe that the career in that role for that person lasted for a long time, because other people were having the same issues. And when your a leader is not welcoming you and is not allowing you to grow, it eventually becomes recognized, right? Like it it's multi-layered. And so here's the thing too, I want to point out, when you're talking to somebody, and this is where that 55% impacted me. When we communicate, only 7% like of our communication is done through words. Believe it or not, only 7% through words. The rest is 38% is through tone that we give. Like we could say, I'm okay, in so many different ways because of our tone and our body language. And as a leader, and if you're a boss and you can't pay attention to everybody, and if you have team leads, that is something that people have to pay attention to, and you can't call it out in front of everybody. But this is where you can pull somebody aside afterwards discreetly and say, hey, I've noticed your energy is like a little different. What's going on for you? Like, did something happen? Do you need additional support? And most of the time, the way you approach it, people will tell you what their needs are, and then you can move on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So there's two directions I kind of want to take this, because you touched on the point that about separating work from personal life.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always, for a long time, I felt that, yes, I could, when I walked out the door at work, then I was just Colin and I was going home, and it was almost like you changed outfit and you changed persona almost. But the reality is I don't believe that anymore, because I think, it sinks in. It's something, goes in, and you carry that with you, even if it's the smallest thought.
Mm-hmm.
You say, oh, yeah, I had a really terrible day or something. Or again, in your private life, as hard as you can try to sort of switch between those two, I believe it still exists in you, in your body. You're carrying it in your mind, in your thoughts, etc. And then in my own case, I found that I'm less tolerant. I would say I'm a very tolerant person, but when something's bothering me, it's like this irritant that sits in. It's almost like something's scratching at my skin, and and then something simple again can sort of manifest into this massive thing. So, but we're told, don't bring your personal life to work. Yet we're also told, so obviously your family don't really want to know too much of, about all the problems at work. You might have a very understanding partner and family, etc. But I don't believe you can separate those two. Have you seen any successful ways of doing that? Is that?
So I'll just be honest. In my experience, it's hard to separate. Even when I would have participants in classes, they were like, I separate it really well. Yet they would keep bringing up their personal life or professional stories. So they may have felt like they were separating, but they were not. And I do think that we can bring that peace into work, but we need to do it discreetly. So what I mean by that is we don't need to know all the details of your argument that transpired between you and your spouse, but you can say, hey, I had a rough night. Some family issues came up. If I'm feeling a little bit off today, it has nothing to do with you. You don't have to be specific. Or same thing with home. If you don't want to talk about your work day, you can say like, hey, I was just, there's a new project I'm working on. It's been, I'm trying to be here, but it's definitely sitting a little bit on my shoulders because I really hope it goes well. You can provide that information so that way it explains your behavior without, going into the detail.
Yeah, I am. That reminds me of. So again, just to go back to my dad, I think he often tried to protect my mum and us from how stressful his work might be. Excuse me, and but my mum actually said to me, she goes, oh, but I would just be okay if he came in and said, oh, look, I've had a really bad day, but I think to say nothing is, has so much impact, because, people love you and want to support you. They don't need all the details, but they know, if they're aware, unless you have some codependency relationship, but if you can give people just a bit of awareness, that,
Yeah.
something's going on, they can give you the space, or they can, you know, the start of an argument won't actually go into an argument, because they go, okay, yeah, I realize you've had a very bad day at work. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, so I do that. In fact, I do that with my kids.
Good.
When I start to feel that I'm tired, or my mood or my energy is down, and I try to explain to them up front, okay, look, Papa's tired, he's going to get angry if we keep on doing this. Doesn't always avoid the me shouting. I hope sometimes that it would, but it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But at least I've given them the opportunity to react. And I think sometimes it's unfair of me to think they're only young kids. So, but I think, just going back to this thing, we try to protect the people around us, and I think sometimes we try to be brave or courageous, or I'm not quite sure. And the thing is, I think we get that wrong. I think, people are
Mm-hmm.
okay to support us. They don't need all the details, etc. So,
Yes.
even if it's 5%, just let people in and just
Yes.
go from there.
I think about it this way. So let's say your boss all of a sudden comes in, and you can tell that they're very frustrated, whatever reason, just to give the team. So because then, look, the team might be like, what's going on? Like, I've been on these teams where everything starts to spiral. Is it a job loss? Are they cutting jobs? Are they mad at us? Like, what's going on? Just to say simple, like, hey, had a personal issue, has nothing to do with you. If I'm feeling a little bit off today, I apologize. Still feel free to come to me if you need anything. It has nothing to do with the team. Again, you're not disclosing all of the things about your personal life, but at least now they have context where they don't assume, and they're not spiraling maybe if they have a job tomorrow. Just a little bit of information really can soothe the mind.
Yeah, I think that's almost such a small thing, but would have a huge impact, because I've been in the office so many times in different companies where, the boss is in a bad mood or something, and so you all try and work out, and then you start assuming, and that's how gossip starts. Us, oh yeah, yeah, and you go, okay, what's going on? This could be handled very easily, just with a simple conversation. Again, you're not sharing all of your personal life, you're just sharing a moment, because that one sentence can,
Mhm.
stop all that assumption and
Yes.
rumors, and then the productivity, because, you know when you don't know, and your mind starts again making catastrophizing all this stuff, you're not
Mhm.
being productive. So it's so beneficial. And I know some people are protective of their private lives, etc., but it doesn't need to be, okay, you explain all of it. Just go, oh yeah,
Mhm.
I'm going through stuff, and just go, yeah. And I also, what I feel, most leaders try to be almost, like they're not human. They try to be like robots, and they go, oh, I'm not affected by things. And I don't know why that is, if it's a cultural thing, or just, like a
Mhm.
status, okay, we need to be this way. And that can be quite lonely, because you don't actually share or confide with people. And
Yeah.
I often think that people think if they confide, then absolutely everything's going to come out. I'm going to share everything. No, it
Mhm.
just take the pressure off. Just explain, because if you don't, the impact in productivity, in people's mood, everything, and again, I think if you're aware enough of, okay, something's going on, and aware enough of what
Mhm.
the impact of what you're doing and how you're doing it is showing up for other people, that that's such a
Yeah.
great area to sort of focus on, because I think you can have, again, people will see you as human. You can stop a lot of the stuff before it becomes
Mhm.
massive for no real reason.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I think that's a big area for me.
Just being intentional, right? Being intentional and being aware of how you're impacting your team and how it's carrying. And the beautiful thing is that, yes, it takes time to, these tools need to be practiced, but a lot of the times they're just little tweaks, right?
Yeah.
When you just said, just telling somebody, hey, I have some personal stuff that came up. If I'm off, it has nothing to do with your team. That's a small little tweak that can really change the team's dynamic, and it often creates more trust, and respect. And so when we do these things, it really changes a lot. It does. And I often say it has saved some of my relationships. I kid you not. I mean, I always make the joke that therapy probably would have been cheaper than spending on this degree. But I would come home and I would say, is this something what's going on for you? Because again, we grew up with the growing up the way I did. I assumed that everybody handled conflict the same way. My
Mm.
family was very direct, and they would tell you, they were also directive, you do this and that. And if there was an issue, you would know about it. And then I started meeting families that I'm just like, oh, they're rolling their eyes. You can totally tell there's a tension in the room. They're slamming the Tupperware, but no one's saying anything. This would not fly in my family, So, yeah, sometimes we have to meet people where they are at, but it doesn't have to be that way. And my one tip is to always do it privately when you're having a conversation. And the way I check in to avoid like blame, I just say like, hey, I noticed your energy is a little off today. Is everything okay? What's going on? That way I'm not telling them like, oh, you're being a jerk. Like, what's going on with you? But just wanted to check in. Just normally your energy is a little different. Is everything okay? And that seems to be people seem to be receptive.
Yeah. So I, the word boundaries
Mm-hmm.
start to come up in my mind, and I don't know, I have this strange relationship with boundaries because
Mm-hmm.
as a I don't know if these things are related, but as a conflict avoider, I'm also very bad at setting boundaries and doing it properly. And again, I've been in trainings where we say, set boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, yeah, it all seems great in the training, but in real life, it's quite difficult. And
It
I
can
think
be.
I think those sort of things are when they don't come naturally to you to set boundaries or know what those boundaries are. I think sometimes, again, I'm very all or nothing, so my boundaries tend to be like these huge brick walls that no one can climb over.
Yeah.
But I think practicing and starting small with healthy
Mm-hmm.
boundaries in your own life and practicing, when people say, okay, they want something from you, etc., etc. I think um, that helps. What's your thoughts on boundaries in terms of
I
conflict?
think boundaries are very important because when we say no, you are saying yes to yourself. And so if it's okay, I'll share an example. And this is a pretty big boundary. And um, yeah, some people are like, what? You didn't what? I'm like, yes, I did. So because I needed it for me. So I decided to skip some family gatherings for holidays this year. It had nothing to do with the family. I hit a moment of burnout for myself, and I was away. I was traveling a lot, and Thanksgiving for us rolled around, and everybody was going up to my husband's. And I said, I'm not going this year. I'm not going. I needed to cook my own food. I needed to decompress. I needed this time to be about me. and calls started coming in, right? Like, why aren't you coming? It was from my dad, from his family, like, and I had to say to them, you know, look, I love you. I do. There's nothing wrong with us. I have been really exhausted and I need this time to recharge. You know, this is something I need to do for myself to be the best version of myself and to be the best family member. And I still got calls on the day of, but I didn't budge. And our relationship is just fine. I did say, like, this is not about you, you know, it's all about me. And it was a great decision. Some people were like, weren't you lonely? No, I wasn't lonely. I've been so overstimulated with people that I needed that step back.
Mm.
So, was it an easy conversation to tell the whole family? My dad included, that usually goes to the same gathering I'm not going. No. And it was about how I was presenting that information. Because one thing about boundaries is, and I would love for everybody to understand, is time is something we cannot get back, right? And so we have to be intentional how we use it. And some people may see some of the acts as selfish or that you don't care. But yeah, I've even pulled out of a wedding once before because, because the boundary, you know, look, our relationship wasn't there. And I said to her, you know, I don't think it would be fair to you have me in your pictures, to be frankly honest. Like, you know, we are not aligned anymore, and I wouldn't want that to impact your day. And here we are still. So, you know, but none of those conversations were easy, but they were boundaries that had to be set.
Yeah. I think, well, as you were talking about the boundaries, I think um, you said the word selfish. I think we're almost told, you know, setting boundaries and not giving to others all the time is selfish. And I think again, if we can reframe that, because you know, we often talk about the analogy of, you know, when a plane's crashing, put your mask on first before your child's. Which I think in modern society, you know, we're like you say, overstimulated. We're saying yes to all these things. It seems very easy to say yes, but harder to say no.
Yeah.
And again, this awareness word still keeps coming up for me, because I think, you know, if you're going to show up, you know, what's the value if you show up and you're in a bad mood, or you know, you bring the energy down, and just putting yourself first doesn't mean that you're selfish for the entire or your entire life. You need a moment, and I think again, not easy to do. And thanks for sharing your scenarios. And I think once you do it, once you practice it, maybe the first one's going to get really hard and it's awkward, or etc. Like you said, you had to explain. You know, it wasn't just to one family member; it was multiple. But
Yes.
if you're clear about, okay, what it is that you need, and you just stick to that, and you honor yourself in that way, and just say, okay, this is what I need now. And you know, time moves on, you know. And I I strongly believe so many people need to do that themselves. And I think the more you can do it yourself, it more allows other people to do that. And I see that in families, I see that in relationships, I see that in work. You know, we're always designed almost to say yes automatically, but saying no is so powerful, and it doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't make you selfish. You're actually super aware of what you need right now.
Exactly. Self-care. It's
Yeah, exactly.
self-care.
But that's often carried with some guilt or some shame of doing that. And again, it's worth digging into that, and you know, sitting with it. It's going to feel uncomfortable, but
Yes.
one of the things that I think in what we can sort of, it ties in quite nicely, is that we often fear the thing itself, but actually all the energy is put into the saying no or avoiding, the
Mm-hmm.
energy that it takes to. So in the scenario, oh yeah, my boss is this, and my brain's thinking this. There's
Mm-hmm.
so much energy sucked out of you. We fear that they're going to shout at you, but then if you just say, okay, he's going to shout at me. What's the worst that can happen? You can just go to another place in your mind. But the fear or the thing that you're building up, all that part before the actual thing
Mm-hmm.
itself is almost the biggest thing, if that makes sense. That's what you fear the most, and you're avoiding that.
Mm-hmm.
But the actual, loads of people shouted at me, I guess over time. But is it true? Is it about me? Is it about them? So.
Going back to the list too, like what is the worst thing that can happen if you speak up, right? Is it about losing your job, or do you already have another job? Like, all of these things can help you process it. And I would also add to the boundaries part. If you say no, stick to it. Because if you don't stick to it, this is a big one. If I was all of a sudden convinced to go, they know that that's going to be a new pattern. So
Yeah,
sticking
exactly.
with it.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. It's hard to say no, but then, like you say, if you go back on what you're saying, then yeah, people will just they'll push you further. Yeah. So I guess the last thing, we sort of come up to an hour, but just in terms of how clients come to you, and we touched on it earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I know you run workshops, etc., but this the whole art of conflict and almost it's the things that we don't say. Do companies come to you and talk to you about leadership, and then you talk about conflict, or is there a lot of companies out there that actually do have conflict? There are founders seeing these problems. What patterns? What's
Yes.
the usual route that people get in contact with you for?
So usually it's about communication.
Okay.
Communication either between two people. Sometimes it is, hey, I've noticed that my communication at work is not landing. I need additional support. So mostly I've been doing one-on-one right now, one-on-one coaching and training. And yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's more about an individual level, people coming
It,
to you.
it is. So especially through LinkedIn. For the other part, for the workshops, I'm doing a lot of networking. When you're a newer company, you're all over the place and meeting new people. But right now, all of my work is coming from clients through LinkedIn. And reaching out and also too, I want to say, admitting that somebody is struggling with communication, it's not easy, right? A lot of people, what I hear in my experience is like, oh, I'm great at communicating. So many people need this, yet it's kind of frowned upon almost in a way, yet it's inevitable. We all deal with it. And so the support is out there. And
Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So something I wrote about in a few posts. It was a conversation with a coach that I've become friends with in Luxembourg, and we were talking about the necessity of having coaches inside the business. Now, I don't think they belong as an employee as part of the business, because I think there's this line: if you're there all the time, then you often get caught into the day to day, and you don't see necessarily the bigger picture. But if you have a coach that comes in regularly, just to check in, even if you're based in a company for a couple of days a week or one day a week or whatever it is, that to me is something that companies don't do. And the comparison was athletes, and if you're a high performer in athletics or any sort of sport, you have a coach. There's no yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
No top performer in any sort of sports or athletics doesn't have a coach. Either that's a team coach or an individual coach. Yet when we turn to business, No, it's like, well, coaching is, and that's the thing. Someone's had to go to you as a one-to-one and reach out to you because they've gone, okay. But as a business, I think, why don't founders, leaders, etc., go, okay, we're asking so much of our people, and this whole topic about conflict, they might not even see it internally, and having someone from the outside to come in and say, okay, look, I can see this, this, and this. Okay, it's not a big deal. We can manage it this way. I think it has so much power. Yet I don't know why businesses and companies don't think that way. And I would like to encourage any of those founders, leaders, just to experiment, even if it's
Yeah.
for like a month, and see what the impact of having these conversations, and having coaches come in and just saying, okay, look, this is something.
And conflict resolution skills, they are also preventative measure. It doesn't have to, you don't have to contact me once the house is on fire. And when everything, the argument started, we don't see an eye to eye. It can be a preventative measure, especially for growing companies that are starting up. You want to make sure that your team is aligned and that they know how to communicate. And then when disagreement or difference of an opinion happens, that they can figure it out without further escalating it.
Yeah. I think this is such a common thing. People wait, like you say, until their house is on fire to come in, but it's just, come on, people, like, it just, and it doesn't take that much. Just if you understand, being in work, there are going to be all these situations, and you can avoid so much of this. And like I say, the conversation about the things that we don't say, that's big, that's huge, that's going to play such a big part. And just have someone alongside along the journey, just to come in
Watch the body language, the little gossiping by the cooler.
exactly. But just like having people around that can help you with that. It doesn't need to be this huge costly exercise. You're not asking for a full-time employee, you're asking for someone to come in and observe and to help. And that doesn't need to be every day. So that's my 10 pennies worth. So
and it's cheaper, because every time you lose that unhappy employee, it takes about 33% of their salary to replace a person.
There you go. Well, that's the thing. If there's any founders out there and they see that 33%, they're all about the numbers most of the time. So
Yes, I learned that fast.
exactly. So fantastic. Well, we're over the hour, so I've had such an amazing time, and I love it when people share stuff with me. So this writing down is a tip for me, for sure. Whenever there's conflict, I'm going to take it away and try it in my own life. So I really appreciate that, and I hope everyone else got a lot from this conversation as I did. So thank you very much for your time. If people want to contact you, which I'm sure they will after this conversation, best place is LinkedIn. I know you have a website. What's the best place?
LinkedIn, olivegrainservices.com. It has 2 S's, because believe it or not, there's a few olive grain services that exist. So it has 2 S's in there. But LinkedIn is my to-go-to place.
Okay, fantastic. Well, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time, Petra. It's so appreciated. And again, I'm always grateful when I come away with a takeaway that I can practice in my own life.
Perfect. Well, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for watching, or who will be watching afterwards.
Lovely. Okay. Take care, Petra. Thanks.
You too. Bye.
Bye.